Nathaniel Grant knew the difference between being watched and being followed. After 30 years of military service, he had learned to notice the small things. A vehicle that stayed 2 car lengths behind him for too long, headlights that appeared in the same mirror at every intersection, a driver who slowed whenever he slowed. That evening, on a quiet Virginia road just outside Arlington, the black SUV behind him had been there for nearly 7 minutes. Nathaniel checked his mirror again. The SUV accelerated. Then the blue and red lights came on. He pulled onto the shoulder without hesitation, lowered his window, and kept both hands visible on the steering wheel. A white female officer approached his door with one hand resting near her holster. "License and registration," she said. Nathaniel handed them over calmly. "Good evening, officer." She glanced at his documents, then at him. Her expression changed. "Where are you coming from?" "Washington." "Going where?" "Home." "Where is home?" Nathaniel paused. "Virginia." She stared at him for a moment longer than necessary. Her name badge read Amanda Pierce. "Step out of the vehicle." Nathaniel looked at her. "May I ask why?" Pierce's jaw tightened. "Because I told you to." He slowly opened his door. "Officer, I'm complying." "Hands where I can see them." Nathaniel stepped onto the pavement. Pierce walked around him, studying him as though she were searching for a reason she had not yet found. "Do you own this vehicle?" "No, it's a rental." "Why are you driving it?" "Because I rented it." Pierce's eyes narrowed. "Don't get smart with me." Nathaniel said nothing. He had spent years in rooms where one careless sentence could put people in danger. He knew when silence was safer. Pierce checked his pockets, then looked through the driver's side window. "You have military identification." Nathaniel glanced at the card visible near the center console. "Yes." "Military?" "Yes." "What rank?" Nathaniel hesitated for half a second. "Colonel." Pierce gave a short, humorless laugh. "Colonel." "Yes." "And you expect me to believe that?" Nathaniel looked directly at her. "You don't have to believe me." Pierce stepped closer. "People carry fake credentials all the time." "Then verify them." Her expression hardened. "Turn around." Nathaniel did not move immediately. "Officer Pierce, I'm not resisting. But I would like to know what I'm being detained for." "You're being detained because you're not cooperating." Nathaniel looked at the camera mounted on her uniform. Then he looked back at her. His voice remained almost unnervingly calm. "Officer, remember everything you say from this moment on." Pierce smiled coldly. "Trust me, Colonel. I will." She pulled out her handcuffs. Nathaniel slowly placed his hands behind his back. The metal clicked shut, and for the first time that night, Amanda Pierce smiled as if she believed she had complete control of the situation. Amanda Pierce tightened the handcuffs and pulled Nathaniel Grant toward the patrol car as if she were escorting a dangerous suspect. Nathaniel offered no resistance. His face remained calm, almost unreadable, while Pierce kept talking in a sharp voice loud enough for the dashboard camera to capture every word. "You were given multiple opportunities to cooperate," she said. Nathaniel looked at her. "I have cooperated with every instruction you gave me." "That's not what I saw." "Then the camera will show what happened." Pierce stopped walking. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Then she leaned closer. "You think that camera is going to save you?" Nathaniel said nothing. A second patrol vehicle arrived. Officer Daniel Brooks stepped out, looked at Nathaniel in handcuffs, then at Pierce. "What happened?" Pierce answered immediately. "Suspicious vehicle." Refused to identify himself properly. Became confrontational. Nathaniel turned his head slightly. "That's not accurate." Pierce snapped. "Did I ask you?" Brooks looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Pierce opened the rear door of her cruiser. "Get in." Nathaniel sat down. Before she closed the door, he said quietly, "Officer Pierce, I have given you my identification. You have my name, my address, and my military credentials. There is still time to verify everything." Pierce stared at him. "You don't get to tell me how to do my job." The door slammed shut. Through the glass, Nathaniel watched her walk back toward his SUV. She opened the driver's door and began searching through the vehicle. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "What are you looking for?" Pierce ignored him. Brooks stood beside her. "Amanda, do you have probable cause for the search?" She looked over her shoulder. "I said I have it handled." Brooks glanced toward Nathaniel, then lowered his voice. He really did seem cooperative. Pierce's expression hardened. Are you questioning me? Brooks immediately stepped back. Pierce continued searching. She opened the center console, checked beneath the driver's seat, and examined the glove compartment. Then she found the military identification Colonel Nathaniel had mentioned. She held it between two fingers. Colonel Nathaniel Grant, she read aloud. Air Force. Brooks looked at the card. Maybe we should verify. He can claim whatever he wants. Pierce interrupted. We have procedures. Nathaniel watched them through the window. He knew exactly what was happening. The situation had stopped being about a traffic violation. Pierce was building a story, piece by piece, and every minute she spent doing it was creating another record that could later be examined. Then Pierce returned to the cruiser and opened the door. You're being transported to the precinct. Nathaniel looked up at her. On what charge? We'll determine that there. And my vehicle? It will be impounded. Nathaniel nodded once. Understood. Pierce frowned. She had expected anger. Instead, she got silence. As she closed the door again, Nathaniel looked directly into the dashboard camera. He didn't say a word, but the tiny red recording light was blinking. And somewhere behind that lens, every second of the arrest was being preserved. The ride to the precinct lasted 17 minutes, but Amanda Pierce spent nearly all of them speaking in her radio, carefully choosing words that sounded official. Suspect displayed hostile behavior during the initial stop, she said. Refused repeated commands and became verbally confrontational. Nathaniel sat silently in the back seat, listening. He knew the danger was no longer the handcuffs. It was the story being created around them. When they arrived at the precinct, Pierce opened the rear door. Out! Nathaniel stepped onto the pavement. Inside, the station was busy with the usual sounds of ringing phones, printers, radios, and officers moving between desks. Pierce guided him toward the booking area while Officer Daniel Brooks followed several steps behind. Nathaniel noticed Brooks watching him with an expression that suggested doubt. Pierce pushed a form onto the desk. Name: Nathaniel Grant. Occupation: United States Air Force. Pierce stopped writing. Rank: Colonel. She looked up. You're still using that? Nathaniel met her eyes. It remains my rank. Pierce gave a quiet laugh. We'll see. She turned to the computer and began typing. A few seconds later, she frowned. Your date of birth? Nathaniel answered. She entered it. Current address? He provided it. Then Pierce asked, Why were you in this area? Nathaniel paused. Personal business. What kind? Private. Her fingers stopped. You're making this difficult. I'm answering the questions you're legally asking. Pierce leaned back. You know what your problem is? Nathaniel said nothing. You think because you wear a uniform somewhere else, you're entitled to special treatment here. Nathaniel looked at the camera above the booking desk. I have never asked for special treatment. Pierce continued typing. Then she began drafting the arrest report. Nathaniel could not see the screen, but he could hear her dictating. Subject refused to exit vehicle after repeated commands. Nathaniel immediately looked at Brooks. That's false. Pierce continued. Subject became argumentative and attempted to intimidate officers by claiming military authority. Brooks shifted uncomfortably. Amanda, she turned toward him. What? Brooks hesitated. The body cam will show he stepped out when you ordered him. Pierce's expression changed. Are you suggesting I'm lying? No, I'm saying we should be precise. Pierce stared at him for several seconds before turning back to the computer. Phoenix. She deleted something. Nathaniel watched quietly. Then Pierce added another charge to the report. Resisting detention. Nathaniel's voice remained calm. I never resisted. Pierce stood and walked toward him. Keep telling yourself that. Nathaniel looked at her. Is that your official statement? She hesitated. Yes. Nathaniel nodded once. Then I'll remember that, too. Pierce walked away, irritated. She did not notice the older receptionist at the far end of the room watching everything. She also did not notice that Officer Brooks had begun looking at his own body cam footage. And she certainly did not know that before the night was over, someone outside the precinct would possess a recording capable of destroying every sentence she had just written. Captain Sarah Whitmore entered the booking area just after 9 that evening, carrying a folder under one arm and a coffee in the other. She had been a supervisor for 12 years, long enough to recognize the difference between a difficult arrest and a report that was trying too hard to sound difficult. She glanced at the paperwork on the desk. "Who's the detainee?" Amanda Pierce answered without looking up. "Nathaniel Grant. Suspicious activity, failure to comply, resisting detention." Sarah looked toward the holding area. Nathaniel was sitting quietly on a bench, his hands still cuffed in front of him. He looked more like a man waiting for a delayed flight than someone accused of resisting officers. Sarah opened the folder. "What happened?" Pierce gave her the same version she had entered into the report. Grant had supposedly refused commands, challenged the officers, and used his military status to intimidate them. Sarah listened without interrupting. Then she asked, "Did he become physically aggressive?" "No." "Did he attempt to flee?" "No." "Did he threaten you?" Pierce hesitated. "Not directly." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Then why is resisting detention listed?" Pierce folded her arms. "He refused to cooperate." Sarah looked down at the report again. "That's not the same thing." Pierce's face tightened. "You weren't there. That's why we have body cameras." Sarah walked toward Nathaniel. "Mr. Grant." Nathaniel stood. "Yes, Captain." Sarah noticed the military bearing immediately. Not the kind someone learned from watching movies, but the small details, the controlled posture, the measured eye contact, the instinctive stillness. "Do you have military identification?" "Yes." "May I see it?" Nathaniel nodded. Sarah looked at the card. Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Colonel," she asked. "Yes." "Active duty?" "Yes." Sarah glanced at Pierce. "Did you verify this?" Pierce answered, "Not yet." Sarah looked back at the card. "Why not?" "Because I don't believe it's relevant." Sarah's voice became quieter. "If he's claiming to be an active duty colonel, verifying it is absolutely relevant." Pierce shook her head. "People fake credentials." Sarah turned to the computer terminal. She entered Nathaniel's name into the internal system. The first search returned nothing unusual. Then she entered his date of birth and military affiliation. A restricted notice appeared. Sarah stopped typing. Her coffee cup remained suspended halfway to the desk. Pierce noticed. "What?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She clicked again. The screen displayed a warning that access required supervisory authorization. Sarah looked at Nathaniel. "What exactly do you do in the Air Force?" Nathaniel remained silent for a moment. "My duties are classified." Pierce scoffed. "Convenient." Sarah ignored her. She looked at Nathaniel again. "Colonel Grant, is there anyone we can contact to verify your identity?" Nathaniel's eyes moved briefly toward the security camera above the booking area. Then back to Sarah. "Yes." Sarah waited. Nathaniel calmly said, "But I think you should decide very carefully who makes that call." For the first time that night, Amanda Pierce stopped smiling. For several seconds, nobody in the booking room spoke. Amanda Pierce crossed her arms, trying to recover the confidence she had shown on the roadside. "Enough with the mystery," she said. "If you're really a colonel, prove it." Nathaniel looked at her calmly. "I already gave you my identification." Pierce stepped closer. "Then make your call." Captain Sarah Whitmore glanced at Pierce. "Amanda, maybe we should verify his credentials before moving forward." "We will," Pierce replied, "after I finish the paperwork." Sarah shook her head. "No, now." Pierce's jaw tightened. Nathaniel finally spoke. "Captain, I don't want anyone here getting into trouble because of something that can be resolved in 30 seconds. Pierce laughed bitterly. "You keep acting like you're in charge." Nathaniel looked at her. "I'm not." Then he added quietly, "But you may want to reconsider what happens next." Pierce gestured toward the phone. "Call whoever you want." Nathaniel stepped toward the desk. His hands were still cuffed, so Sarah unlocked one wrist long enough for him to use the phone. He dialed a number from memory. Nobody recognized it. There was one ring. 2, 3. Then someone answered. Nathaniel's voice changed slightly. It became more formal, precise, the voice of someone accustomed to speaking in secure rooms and issuing information that could alter entire operations. "This is Colonel Nathaniel Grant. I'm currently being detained at the Arlington County Police Department." Sarah watched him carefully. Pierce rolled her eyes. "This is ridiculous." Nathaniel continued. I need my identity verified and the circumstances of my detention documented. There was a pause. Nathaniel listened. His expression remained calm. Yes, I'm safe. Another pause. Then the person on the other end asked something. Nathaniel looked toward the ceiling camera. Yes, they have recorded everything. Pierce's face changed. Who are you talking to? Nathaniel ignored her. I'll remain here until instructed otherwise. He ended the call. Sarah immediately asked, who was that? Nathaniel handed the receiver back. Someone who can verify my identity. Pierce scoffed. That's all. For now. Pierce turned toward the booking computer. We're still processing him. Sarah stepped in front of her. Amanda, stop. Pierce stared at her. Captain, don't enter another charge. Don't alter the report. Don't move him anywhere until we verify who he is. Pierce's expression hardened. You're taking his word over mine? Sarah answered. I'm taking evidence over assumptions. Pierce opened her mouth to respond, but the telephone on the supervisor's desk suddenly rang. Sarah picked it up. Captain Whitmore. She listened. Her face slowly lost its color. I'm sorry, who is calling? She listened again. This time, she stood straighter. Yes, sir. Pierce watched her carefully. Sarah's eyes moved toward Nathaniel. Understood. She hung up. Nobody spoke. Then Pierce asked, who was that? Sarah looked at her. Washington. Pierce frowned. What agency? Sarah swallowed. Department of Defense. The confidence disappeared from Pierce's face. Nathaniel simply sat down again. He had known this call was coming. What nobody in that room knew was that it was only the first of several. The room seemed to shrink after Sarah Whitmore hung up the phone. Amanda Pierce stared at her supervisor, waiting for an explanation, but Sarah did not speak immediately. She looked at Nathaniel Grant instead. He was still sitting calmly on the bench, his cuffed hands resting in front of him. Colonel Grant, Sarah said carefully, the Department of Defense is requesting confirmation of your location. Pierce immediately stepped forward. Why would the Department of Defense care about a traffic arrest? Sarah looked at her. Because he's not just a name on an arrest report. Pierce scoffed. We still don't know if those credentials are real. Sarah's expression hardened. We do now. She turned toward the computer and pulled up the verification response that had just arrived. Nathaniel Grant's military identity had been confirmed. Active duty, Colonel, United States Air Force. No criminal history. No outstanding warrants. No indication that his identification was fraudulent. Pierce stared at the screen. That doesn't mean the arrest was wrong. No, Sarah said, but it means we need to stop making it worse. Before Pierce could respond, the main telephone at the front desk rang again. The receptionist answered. Her expression changed almost instantly. Captain Whitmore, it's for you. Sarah picked up the receiver. Whitmore. A male voice spoke with controlled authority. Sarah listened. Yes, sir. Her eyes moved toward Pierce. The subject is secure. Another pause. No, sir. He has not been injured. Another pause. Sarah's face became serious. Understood. We will preserve all recordings. She ended the call and remained silent for several seconds. Pierce finally asked, who was that? Sarah answered quietly, the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Pierce's face went pale. You're serious? Completely. Nathaniel looked down at his cuffed wrists. Captain, may I ask that my restraints be removed? Sarah immediately nodded. Yes. She unlocked the cuffs herself. Pierce stepped forward. Wait, are we releasing him? Sarah turned. We're not deciding anything until federal authorities arrive. Pierce's voice rose. This is a local police matter. Sarah looked directly at her. It stopped being that when you arrested an active duty colonel under circumstances now being reviewed by the Department of Defense. Pierce looked toward Nathaniel. Who are you? Nathaniel stood slowly. For the first time, he gave her an answer without hesitation. I am Colonel Nathaniel Grant. Pierce shook her head. That's not what I mean. Nathaniel held her gaze. I know. Before she could say anything else, another phone began ringing. This time it was on Chief Raymond Keller's desk upstairs. A few moments later, an officer rushed into the booking area. Captain, Chief wants everyone to stop processing the arrest. Sarah asked why. The officer looked at Nathaniel, then at Pierce. Because the Pentagon just called the precinct directly. Nathaniel said nothing. Pierce finally understood the warning he had given her on the roadside. She had believed he was trying to intimidate her. He had simply been telling her the truth. And now the entire precinct was about to learn exactly who they had arrested. By 10:30 that night, the atmosphere inside the precinct had completely changed. Officers who had barely noticed Nathaniel Grant an hour earlier were now speaking in whispers, watching supervisors rush between offices and avoiding Amanda Pierce's eyes. Chief Raymond Keller entered the booking area carrying a folder. His expression was severe. "Everyone stops what they're doing," he said. "Nobody deletes, changes, copies, or removes anything connected to this arrest." Pierce immediately stepped forward. "Chief, I followed procedure." Keller looked at her. "Did you?" "Yes." "Then you have nothing to worry about." Pierce nodded, but Keller's next question made her freeze. "Where's the original body camera footage?" "On the system." "Good. Nobody touches it." He turned toward Nathaniel. "Colonel Grant, I owe you an apology." Nathaniel stood quietly. "Chief, I appreciate that, but an apology isn't what matters right now." Keller frowned. "What does?" "Preserving the truth." Keller studied him. "You knew this was going to happen." Nathaniel didn't answer immediately. Then he said, "I knew the evidence would eventually speak for itself." Pierce scoffed from across the room. "You make it sound like you planned this." Nathaniel turned toward her. "I didn't plan to be stopped." "Then why were you so calm?" she demanded. "Because I've spent most of my career understanding that panic makes bad situations worse." Pierce shook her head. "You knew someone important would come," Nathaniel replied. "I knew that if you were acting within the law, there would be nothing to fear." That sentence silenced the room. Keller opened the folder. Inside were printed copies of the original dispatch records, body cam timestamps, and the first version of Pierce's report. "Amanda," he said, "your report says Mr. Grant refused to exit the vehicle." Pierce immediately answered. He hesitated. Keller pointed to the timestamp. "The body cam shows 6 seconds between your command and him opening the door." Pierce said nothing. Keller continued. "Your report says he became verbally aggressive." He turned another page. "The audio doesn't support that." Pierce's face reddened. "He was intimidating." Keller looked at her. "That's not a charge." Then another officer entered carrying a tablet. "Chief, we found something." He played a video recorded from across the street. It showed the entire initial stop from another angle. Nathaniel stepping out. Nathaniel keeping his hands visible. Nathaniel offering his identification. Pierce searching the vehicle. Every detail contradicted the narrative she had written. Pierce stared at the screen. "Where did you get that?" The officer answered, "A civilian uploaded it before the arrest was even processed." Nathaniel remained silent. Keller turned toward Pierce. "You told me there were no independent witnesses." Pierce had no answer. Then Keller's phone rang. He answered, listened, and his expression changed. "Yes, sir." A pause. "Understood." He hung up slowly. That was the Federal Inspector General. He looked around the room. "They want every piece of evidence preserved because they're opening a formal investigation." Pierce whispered, "Over one traffic stop?" Keller looked at her. "No, detective." He glanced at the video on the tablet. "Over what this traffic stop revealed." The formal investigation began before sunrise. By 6 in the morning, federal investigators were inside the precinct, requesting body camera files, dispatch recordings, arrest reports, vehicle search logs, and every complaint ever filed against Detective Amanda Pierce. She had spent the night insisting that the incident was being exaggerated. By breakfast, she was no longer allowed to access the case system. Chief Raymond Keller called her into his office and placed her badge on the desk. "You are suspended pending investigation." Pierce stared at him. "You're suspending me because a colonel made a phone call?" Keller shook his head. "I'm suspending you because the evidence doesn't match your report." "I followed procedure." Keller opened a folder. "Then explain this." Inside were 3 older complaints. Each involved Pierce. Each complainant was a black man. Each report contained remarkably similar language. Failed to comply, became confrontational, attempted to intimidate officers, and resisted detention. Pierce looked at the documents. Those cases were reviewed. "Yes," Keller said. "And now they're being reviewed again." Another investigator entered carrying a hard drive. We recovered archived footage from 2 prior incidents. Pierce's face changed. The first video showed her stopping a black driver outside a convenience store. The second showed another man being handcuffed beside a parked vehicle. In both recordings, the official reports described aggressive behavior that the footage did not support. Keller closed his eyes briefly. "How many?" the investigator asked. "We're still counting." Across town, Nathaniel sat with federal officials in a quiet conference room. They asked him to describe everything from the moment Pierce activated her lights. He did not exaggerate. He did not insult her. He simply gave them the facts. When one investigator asked why he had remained so calm, Nathaniel answered, "Because I knew the moment would pass, but the record would remain." The investigator looked down at his notes. "You understand that your case may expose a broader pattern?" Nathaniel nodded. "That's why I want the investigation to continue." Meanwhile, Pierce was called before an internal review panel. She maintained that Nathaniel had manipulated the situation. "He knew exactly what he was doing," she said. "He was trying to provoke me." The investigator placed a laptop on the table. "Then let's watch what happened." The video began. Nathaniel calmly providing his license. Nathaniel stepping out when instructed. Nathaniel answering every question. Then Pierce's voice. "You people always think you're above the law." The room went silent. Pierce looked down. The investigator paused the recording. "Who were you referring to?" Pierce said nothing. "Detective Pierce?" Still nothing. The investigator continued. "We also have your body camera footage, Officer Brooks's footage, the civilian recording, dispatch logs, and your original report." He leaned forward. "Your statement is no longer the only version of events." Pierce finally whispered, "I made a mistake." The investigator looked at her. "No, a mistake is entering the wrong date on a form." He closed the laptop. "What we are investigating is whether you knowingly abused your authority and then attempted to conceal it." For the first time, Amanda Pierce realized that the badge she had relied on for protection was now part of the evidence against her. 3 weeks later, the hearing room was filled before the doors officially opened. Reporters stood along the back wall, while federal investigators sat at a long table covered with folders, transcripts, and digital evidence. Amanda Pierce entered without her uniform. Her badge had been suspended, her weapon confiscated, and her authority reduced to a name on an investigation file. She looked toward Nathaniel Grant, who sat quietly near the front with his attorney. He was wearing his Air Force dress uniform, every medal and insignia precisely arranged. Pierce stopped for half a second when she saw him. The man she had handcuffed beside a Virginia highway now sat in a room where every word she had spoken was being examined. The hearing began with the body camera footage. Nobody interrupted. They watched Pierce stop Nathaniel, question him, order him out of the vehicle, and place him in handcuffs despite his calm cooperation. Then came the booking footage. The false statements in her report were displayed beside the actual recordings. Refused to exit. The video showed Nathaniel exiting immediately. Became aggressive. The audio showed a calm voice. Attempted to intimidate officers. The recording showed Nathaniel repeatedly telling Pierce that he was complying. Then the panel played the sentence that changed the room. "You people always think you're above the law." The recording ended. The chairwoman looked toward Pierce. "Do you deny making that statement?" Pierce stared at the table. "No." "Do you deny that Colonel Grant complied with your instructions?" Pierce swallowed. "No." "Do you deny that your report contained statements contradicted by the recordings?" She hesitated. "No." The chairwoman closed the file. "Then the facts are clear." But the hearing did not end with Pierce. Investigators presented evidence from previous cases, revealing a pattern of similar arrests and altered reports. Officers who had remained silent were questioned. Some admitted they had been afraid to challenge Pierce. Others acknowledged that complaints had been dismissed without proper review. Chief Keller testified that the department had failed to identify the pattern earlier. Nathaniel listened without expression. When it was finally his turn to speak, the room became completely silent. "Colonel Grant," the chairwoman said, "what do you want from this investigation?" Nathaniel stood. He could have demanded punishment. He could have attacked Pierce personally. Instead, he looked across the room and said, "I want the next person she stops to have a fair chance to walk away. Pierce lowered her eyes. Nathaniel continued, "This isn't about my rank. If I had been a civilian with no connections, the truth should still matter." The panel later recommended termination, decertification, and criminal review for Pierce, while the department was ordered to reopen previous complaints. Outside the building, reporters surrounded Nathaniel. One asked, "Colonel, do you feel justice was served?" Nathaniel paused before answering. "Justice isn't when someone powerful saves you." He looked back at the courthouse. "Justice is when the truth doesn't need saving." Then he walked away, leaving Amanda Pierce to face the consequences of the authority she once believed made her untouchable. Please like and subscribe to the channel to hear more stories of justice.